Well, I'm very glad, and I have a great emotion in being here. I'm glad, and it's a great emotion for me to be here. It's some years that I haven't joined EECERA, and I thank for the invitation. And of course, my presentation will not be as inspiring as Michel, so I'm so glad that he went first. And I hope, as Italian keynote speaker, to raise your interest, probably in some topics which are not exactly like what the title of my presentation says. Please, Chris, give me the time, because I know it has been a very intensive morning. So first of all, thank you, Bologna. Thank you, Lucia and Arianna. I'm saying it as Italian. Our friends had often asked us to host EECERA, and for example, in Milano, we didn't dare. So it took Bologna to have the courage and the perfection to do it. They are human, though, so there is a small imperfection I've noted. The very nice backpack I found in my room has a zip that doesn't work well. So I felt better, because everything else has been told me. I arrived only late last night. It's so beautiful and so perfect, and I'm sure that you will have a wonderful experience in the next coming days. Well, thank you to the scientific committee, who worked very hard, and thank you to EECERA to be so vital and having attracting so many colleagues, professionals, and researchers. This year, I'm going very fast on this, because you heard Francesca Polizzi. For us, it's a very important year, this 2017, because finally, after 46 years, we have a new law which gives us hope for the 0-6 integrated system. We have waited and waited. We have an honorable system who gives access to the almost 100%, over 95% of children 3 to 6, and to a good percentage of younger children, although in a kind of very unequal distribution. But we needed a framework, and we needed the hope for regular, although not rich, funding, at least not so rich in this crisis, still crisis years. So Francesca Polizzi was the champion of this law, and for us, it's really a big pride and an occasion of relief to be able to do, even to host this conference in this year. And it's also a great responsibility, because these laws also opens up spaces for pilot experiences, for innovation, for more flexibility, and that will be the responsibility for all of us in the next years. So EC is under the spotlight. I take from what Michel said one word, many, but at least one, he mentioned at the end, that we are more and more, in reading, in literature, in the European documents, in policy documents, dematerializing childhood. I hope the end of my presentation will have 2 little videos that we get out from this morning rematerializing childhood, thinking at children as they exist in their experience and how they are. Then Michel said also that our opinion counts. So my accent will be a little different, and I would rather that what is underlying my ideas in my presentation is how can our opinion count? This is also a political question. They count. How can we then count more? So also be listened by whom make decisions. We have to influence them, but first we'll have to be listened. So we have a huge responsibility. There are different interpretations of rights, not of tithes, but of rights, social justice and solidarity, and different priorities. Different interpretation of research lead to different decisions. Michelle's presentation was very clear on that. So we have the responsibility to raise our voices in a forceful debate, but also in a peaceful dialogue, to make all children visible in their uniqueness and in their diversity. We here have a huge responsibility. No, I've done it again. Yes, sorry, but my presentation is always horrible in that. And we want to make children have the responsibility to raise our voices, to have a debate, to have dialogue, to acknowledge that the educational values and goals, as well as interpretation of competences and educational strategies, are diverse on one hand and culturally universal on one hand and culturally situated on the other. Looking for a new, open and convincing way to think and speak about children's experiences, educational strategies, and development that can make children even more visible. So my ideas, what I address mainly by talking and not by looking at the slides, are inspired or refer to two projects I have been engaged to with many colleagues who are here in the past years. The first is the Children Crossing Border project. Chris and Tony were with us in it, which was led by Joe Thobin, and about which you can find, apart from articles which appeared in the years before, a synthesis in the book Preschool and Immigrant in 5 Countries, which was recently issued last year by Peter Lang. The second project is the project CARE, which is Curriculum Quality Analysis and Impact Review in European ECEC. And you can also see from the title how different it is in scope and in ideas from the first one. That involved 11 European countries, and that was completed in the December of 2016. The aims of Children Crossing Borders were to give voice to the hopes, beliefs, and concerns of immigrant parents about the education and care of their young children. So to give voice to the parents, also to the teachers, but mainly to the parents. And to identify and explicate 5 models of working with children of immigrants in the hope that countries could learn from each other. And because, as we noticed, there is a critical shortage of studies on the experience of children. We have more and more meta-analysis, more and more things with curves like Heckman that was shown before. We have less and less studies who go deeper in the actual experience of children. And to offer parents and staff of preschool a process to engage in dialogue about what is best for young children in order to find their voices, strengthen them, and strengthen the understanding between parents and teachers, making it easier for children also to negotiate their differences. The method was visual multivocal ethnography. CARE. The stated aim of this project was to develop an evidence-based and cultural sensitive European framework of developmental goals, quality assessment, curriculum approaches, and policy measures for improving the quality and effectiveness of ECEC. You can see quite different conceptions, quite different paradigms of reference. It was multi-methods. That's very trendy now to say multi-methods. Literature review, meta-analysis, interviews, questionnaires. We used class as a compare and assess quality, video clip library, case studies, for example, professional development when we Italians were the lead. We have 2 questions. Is evidence-based and sensitive, which is how the aim of care is stated, an oxymoron? Can we have something which is both evidence-based and cultural sensitive? I think the talk by Michelle gave us some insights in that. So I think that if we go back to that aim, I might go back, we will see that we can take each word, and behind each word, we will find different paradigms which are quite clash with what we heard in the presentation which preceded mine. So is that possible? How can we but that's my point, how can we make our voices, opinions becoming important and listened to? And comparing the aims of the first study, which used a video ethnography in a qualitative methodology, with these studies, we tried to mix methods, but was essentially quantitative. Can we put these two parts in dialogue? Is it possible to have a dialogue and an increase of understanding if you take two perspectives and we put them into dialogue? So I will briefly address some general issues about these questions, arguing them to two themes, if I have the time, but I want to spare time for the videos, curriculum and the stakeholders' ideas, how they come out from care. And then I will end with two visual examples. Reflecting on the challenge of care, as I said, there is a constant tension between evidence-based and cultural sensitive. And we researchers tend to emphasize this tension, doing what Dewey defined sects, something analogous of what Dewey defined as sects in 1902 in the article The Child and Curriculum. To avoid this, we need a cross-cultural posture, because it is a cross-cultural experience, a dialogue between quantitative evidence-based measure people, outcome and assessment, and qualitative researchers who put their hands into the experiences and have an anthropological or qualitative approach, is a cross-cultural experience. And I think we have to begin to try to do it. And I think we can do it, because since we qualitative people, I'm there, don't believe in permanent truth, we don't think we have the truth forever, we are the ones who are responsible of opening the dialogue, not those who think they have the whole truth, a permanent truth in their hands. Through dialogue and exchange of experience. I think there is dialogue, there is scientific dialogue, there are forums like this, but then there is exchange of experiences. I will repeat this word. Of course, even this is a Deweyan echo several times, and I'll finish showing you some experience by children. Creating forums, provoking debate, exchanging experiences and ideas about children's experiences. And here I would like to make a reflection. There has been what I call an educational pilgrimage. Pilgrims go to Fatima, to Lourdes, to many places, to Mecca, depends on their religion. But there is a very extraordinary educational pilgrimage that, as far as I know, started with the world getting in touch with Reggio Emilia and with some way of describing children and their potentiality, not only with words, which has characterized for 30 or 40 years ECEC. I imagine something similar exists also in other levels of education, but I think that's very peculiar. In Europe and in the world, extended today by documentation, technology and video research, we can have a hint, a better hint of what's going on, what we want to exchange also physically and in person through many tools we didn't have before. And that helps and to become a forum for reflection, for dialogue, for exchanges, interpretations, and also to raise misunderstandings, which are very good to generate new meanings and reinterpretation. We experienced this very strongly in the children crossing border research. It was from the misunderstandings, even from the conflict, but mainly from the misunderstandings, that we had the need to explain better, to transform experience in communication, as Dewey says, and that we had different point of view, we saw more, and we reached new meanings and new interpretations. So, before going to the example of curriculum, I will just, which I do not using slides, I will go to my notes and go back to this fact about the experience we had in these two projects. Sorry. So, the experience of children crossing borders was animated by an anthropologist of education like Joe Tobin and was carried out by a research group which shared the research approaches, although it learned a lot from this long 6 years experience. It has been rich, deep, and difficult. It implied videos of a day in a school in 5 cities, many focus groups, particularly with immigrant parents in the different countries, and innumerable discussions in the research group. You will find an echo of these discussions in the book. It was an important growth for us, with the constant risk to become self-centered and unable to speak publicly and influence policies. The many years we have waited to publish the book are an example of that. We were never deep enough. We have learned a lot. The experience in care was difficult because researchers were epistemologically different, in particular we Italians. We were hooked because Italy is interesting and we hooked Reggio Emilia, so mainly for that. And we were constantly reciprocally challenged by different approaches. I do not know whether the results will be influential, but we certainly learned a lot. And I also think our partners, some of our partners who had radically different positions at the beginning, learned a lot. Just to give an example, the space of case studies, video library, videos of practices, and deepening of qualitative case studies got larger during the process of the project. I anticipate another point here. In part of this project, the project envisaged to evaluate good practices using an instrument which many of you might know, which is CLASS, designed by Robert Pianta. It is a very interesting instrument that through the videos of moments in the day of the children, set a number of criteria to evaluate the adult-child, teacher-child interaction as a major factor, I would say a protective factor and a qualitative factor in ECEC. It is a very interesting instrument, but we objected immediately. Giulia Pastore is here, and you have in the program one session where you will see the work that the Italian team has done with some other partners to be critically constructive and modify this instrument, which we also used with the colleagues of Reggio Emilia. We just opposed the fact that an instrument which had been devised in another cultural context could be automatically used in Europe, in Italy, in different countries. It was more compatible with some contexts, less compatible with others. So what happened, which that gave rise to a discussion where particularly our Dutch and Portuguese colleagues took part, of a critical revision of an instrument which was not situated in Europe, and particularly not situated in the single countries, done with teachers and with stakeholders, with teachers. So the instrument was used, but then was also discussed, criticized, completed, redefined through a local significant dialogue. It's just an example. It's not my task to go deeper into this. You will find in this same conference as a symposium where this will be discussed. So I won't go on that later on. Another theme of the first working package, as now these things are called. I hate thinking that thoughts about children are packed and that become working packages, but that is one of the many metaphors I don't like. But anyway, another theme, the first theme we addressed was curriculum. And this is, as you know, a very culturally sensitive and tricky question. Excuse me. Now, curriculum, why? And we had debate. The final report was drawn beautifully by Kathy Silva. It stresses communalities, it stresses differences, not only differences in curricula, from the hundreds of pages of some to the few pages of others, what's going on in Europe altogether, but also it has a very interesting glossary that shows the sliding of meanings of many words. What means pedagogy for Italians, for British, for other countries? We are all using English, but there is a sliding of meanings which reflect the pedagogical or tradition which stays behind. So there is a glossary that gives good discussion also of what are the possible and different meanings of these concepts we always use in our paper, in our writing, and also in the policy paper. Because curriculum is a cultural construct. And therefore, it needs to be culturally defined. There is, you can say, in a more traditional, usually it concerns outcomes and assessment, brings about acceleration and urgency. Why I'm saying this? Because the etymology of curriculum comes from currere, very difficult word to say to me. That's the Latin verb for running. But it also, if you take dictionaries, it will say that it comes from chariot. So a chariot, whether if you run, you run. So you can be a running curriculum. But you can have a chariot where more people wander around. So the metaphor we can take from the origin of this word can make us think of different ways to interpret it. It can also be curriculum cursus honorum, the good things we have done in our life that we can document, narrate, look back to. Or our curriculum to be very productive in a company. So all these words, going back to the etymology, even of the same words, bring about different meaning. I wonder if anything like this could be found in languages I don't know, spoken by many of the people who are here. So, it takes urgency. It could be, I would say, many times has been interpreted of doing things at a given time, possibly fast, or not slow, not so slow to slow children down, to prepare them to be successful students, productive citizens as soon as possible. Or it could be interpreted also in other way. The most common idea about it imply general value-oriented goals, specific objectives, tasks, skill, masteries, intentional procedures, performance children should reach, contents, prescriptive content or planned, needed to reach the objectives, teaching methods, also including organization procedures, learning experiences, a time schedule when possible, and when should be this objective reached, and evaluation of learning, successes, and failure. But there are also different ideas, different way of thinking about curriculum. A different conceptualization which has been influenced strongly by Reggio Emilia, is that of emergent curriculum. That means an approach where children's group or children in a group have experiences that develop into projects, supported, relaunched, and documented by well-prepared adults. Curiosity, endurance, teamwork, persistency, the so-called character skills, now valued even by Heckman. But we could look at character skills, these and endurance, tenacity, responsibility towards the others, persistence, also looking at other tradition. I'm thinking of a beautiful book by the Chinese Jin Li about the Confucian tradition in learning. So we can interpret even these things from different points of view. And that's the emerging curriculum and the project work. A definition from an anthropological or cultural psychological point of view or cultural pedagogical point of view is a curriculum should be what is good, right, beautiful, and that children develop or should learn in a given cultural context. I'm quoting here my friend Rebecca New, which is here, and Robert Levine. And from the beginning of the last centuries, we had, I'm not going into that, we had big different traditions in Europe where the big educationalists, which were common references for all countries in care, like Pestalozzi, Froebel, Montessori, but also Piaget. Piaget is a European after all, Vygotsky and others as psychologists, are common background readings and gave way to places to live for children in ECEC who had to develop curricula of different type and emerging curricula. The tradition in the United States were different, was to provide early childhood education for disadvantaged children. So the perspective was not universal, but was focused, earmarked for children in need. So that makes a big difference for all children, for children who have special particular needs. Of course, Montessori started with that, but then she herself opened it up to others. And even in care, that comes out quite clearly, even the references to the same authors, Montessori or even Piaget, are quite specifically interesting for that, are seen from different point of views in different countries and contexts. Some take from Montessori all the observational skills of the teacher, the autonomy of the child. Others take a curriculum which is child-centered in timing, but is quite hard in its content. So even the reference to the same tradition and authors is interpreted differently in different countries. Let me, how much time do I have? Very quickly, I'll stop on that, and again, there's a tension here. A tension in a main goal, which is to provide children with a good place to live and to develop experiences that make them richer, happier, and a perspective who wants to have programs who make sure that children learn what is necessary for them to be successful in the future, that's one way of phrasing it, or not to be excluded from society later on. I think that both positions have to be listened to. The risk of the hard position has been quite well expressed by Michel, and I don't have to go back to that, but also the risk of a self-centered curriculum, which is only looking at that group of children in that particular area, developing from their experiences without looking outside, risks very much to, what I say, cocoon children and don't let them grow, be adventurous enough to face a world and a future which is very difficult to anticipate and to predict. So we need a dialogue there. We started a dialogue, and I think that is one example of where dialogue, even strong, forceful dialogue is needed. Second, I go very, very fast. A second point I wanted to touch is the stakeholders idea. What do the most important stakeholders, apart from children, that is parents and staff, think about what is important for children in the early years? I don't think there is probably enough time to go deeper in that, but within the project CARE, we made a stakeholder studies, a study which, with different instruments, interviews, but mainly through a questionnaire, collected about 3,500 contributions from parents and teachers in 9 countries. Italy had an incredible response. Many teachers, but also many parents responded to the questionnaire, who was asking about developmental educational goals, their ideas about quality of ECEC, and also their ideas about inclusion and diversity. I'm going very quickly to tell you some of the results, the provisional results of this study. We have planned in different countries, and particularly in Italy, a restitution of the data even to the single cities or groups of schools or groups of parents who participated to the study. So I'm just giving very, very general ideas. There was, of course, I told you about the numbers, and I could let's see. The remarkable first finding is the response. It's quite clear that parents and teachers are interested or worried, or interested and worried, and want to talk about it. So at least also a questionnaire is good enough to express their opinion. So that was remarkable. Particularly in some countries, there was a big difference between some countries and some others. And also that we apparently have a shared language for expressing our questions, apparently. So the big discussion was made to decide the questions to set to our audience, to parents and staff. And apparently, looking at the answers, we found a common language. I stress the word apparently because, again, even we can see it in the formulation of questions that you can find in the reports. For all these things you can look in the report. It's word package 6, this of the stakeholder studies. But somehow, what comes out is understandable. It needs more deepening, but we have some kind of a common language. It needs deepening, but we have it. We were talking about interpersonal skills, positive attitude towards diversity, pre-academic skills, learning-related skills like expressing ideas, asking questions, attitude towards learning, making plans, physical, motor, and creative skills, emotional regulation, I'll come back later on that, personal learning attitudes. Some of these are the important non-cognitive skills that we are now on the forefront and on which we have to think and use our voices and our opinions. One thing, altogether, there were many communalities between countries and many, even more communalities between the ideas of parents and staff in countries, within countries. But there was some diversity, and of course I think the use of an extended quantitative research is to point to what is so interesting that would mean to be deepened. Not just to state there are some diversity there and just advance some interpretations with no ground, but just be an arrow that says there we need an in-depth study. There is a sharp increase in the importance that parents attach to hard pre-academic learning skills for the children 3 to 6 compared to the children 0 to 3. So, and particularly from immigrant parents. So parents are more worried than workforce about the success of children in the school and afterwards. It is understandable. Think about migration. I mean, immigrants are worried. In our Children Crossing Border project, one Egyptian father told us one sentence that I keep remembering and repeating. He said, preschool is heaven. The hell starts later. And when I go in a bus, before we would talk, now they hardly look at me. That was 10 years ago. Can you imagine what it is now in Italy and abroad, which the wave of migration we have to handle? So, heaven and hell. Of course, we don't want hell in ECEC, but not even purgatory, if I can quote Dante. But it's quite clear that school is not only a challenge, but a threat for many immigrant families and children. So the worry of immigrant parents for the skills who make the children capable to be successful in school are very understandable. It's our job to try to move their attention not only on technical skill, but the dominant language is not a technical skill, but also to curiosity, attitudes to learning, and other things, and to listen to their voice, to find a new balance between the priorities we have in our curriculum. There is an agreement among parents and staff about, within countries, and interpersonal skills, emotional regulation, and personal learning attitudes have been rated as most important by both stakeholders. Academics are more important for parents than for teachers, but interpersonal skills, emotional regulation, and personal learning attitudes are there. We have an alliance. So I think that points out something we have to go deeper into and about which we can work. Another thing is the sensitiveness about diversity. Some countries had higher, valued more as a developmental goal for their children, the fact that their child would be sensitive towards diversity. Here something strange comes out. Italy ranks like one of the countries where this is higher. England, or even the Netherlands, or Finland, which had a much longer experience in hosting and doing specific efforts for immigrant children, rate a little bit lower. So again, this is an error. That means we have to interpret that. Is the fact you have children should be more aware about diversities a value or a worry? Are those who answer thinking about inclusiveness and diversities in the sense of disabilities, where certainly for a long tradition in Italy, we are very open. All disabled children have a right to be in early childhood services and schools, or is really what can we do about it? The lesser importance in other countries, what does it mean? That this culture is, I don't think in ECEC, is more closed, or that parents and workforce are aware of how difficult it is to work well on that. So there will be so many more things to say, but I will let that because I want to finish my presentation. There are other themes that came out about the quality ideas about parents, where the professional development, a stable group of well-prepared staff ranked first. And that is very important, and again in this conference you will have more than one presentation, and especially one about care, about the case studies, including Reggio Emilia, that we carried out in this study. So now, let me go, and thank you for being patient, listening to me, although it's not being very systematic, but I would like to turn to something to conclude, and maybe to leave you with some lighter fact. And look, I'll show you a video, and I put this video because I'll ask some questions about curriculum at the end of this video, and about self-regulation. Can we go with the video? I'll do it. Here it is. That is 1 minute 30.
Come mai Pietro si è arrabbiato?
Ho costruito la macchina.
E poi cosa è successo?
Poi ho urlato.
Hai urlato perché sono venuti a toccarti la costruzione?
Sì.
Ah, e gli dici?
No, non è tutto. Finisce lì? Non è completo. Forse l'avete preso dalla chiavetta, da una chiavetta dove non c'è tutto, dalla chiavetta. Vediamo. Allora, intanto avete visto questa prima parte di questo video che dura 1 minuto e mezzo. Yeah, oh, you've seen the first part of this video, which is 1.5 minutes, but we only seen one part. I've shown this video in other contexts, and the reason was that it was in a cross-cultural research we are carrying out with some American colleagues. It was chosen by the teacher as one example of a good practice, in her opinion. And that was the reason I'm presenting it, because in other times where I discussed it, the opinion had been very different.
E poi cosa è successo? Hai urlato perché sono venuti a toccarti la costruzione?
Sì.
Ah, e gli dici, l'ho fatta io questa costruzione. Però la Vanessa mi sa che ha capito che non deve toccare le costruzioni che fa Pietro, perché Pietro si arrabbia.
So, what about self-regulation? Is that a good example or a bad example? I think it has to do with time. Pietro was a biting little boy, a hitting little boy, was not speaking much. Now, Pietro speaks, he stutters, he's very emotional. He used language instead of biting and hitting. And believe me, Vanessa, who says I'm angry too, is not an easy partner. So, the point is, should we evaluate a clip like this? To evaluate, we need what is behind, not just one spot, the time, what the teacher had in mind. The fact that one major goal for this group of age is that children evolve in using other forms for expressing their emotions, even if they are powerful forms, aggressive forms like this. But Pietro uses verbs, he even used some kind of a metaphor. You are hard, hard, hard as wood. And if you look at the context, that's another attention. Are the others upset? No. There is one child who sleeps in a basket. The other child are waking up. Elisa is quite so it's normal. It's normal in an Italian infant toddler center where the teacher has a certain curriculum on self-regulation on mind, and where the emotions are probably spoken out with louder voices and more gesture than probably, I'm just making a prejudiced generalization, maybe a Japanese or American context. So how could you evaluate this? How could we assess this? If not, unless we know the context and we talk with the people. So it's somehow a provocative clip, but it's for us a very important clip. And so that all these ideas, self-regulation, emotions, and all these things need a several cultural shared definition of the various way in which we mean them and how they can be visible in the real experiences of children, which, quoting Jo Tobin again, we have in critical shortage of studies and examples of children's experiences. Now, if possible, the second video, this is a little bit longer, but I'll just finish with a word after that.
Guardiamo bene come ha fatto questo qua.
No.
No, perché no? Guarda.
After that, just one second. Look at this.
Ci sono formiche. Portiamoli al tavolino che andiamo a guardarli.
Oscar, tu lo vedi quale insetto?
Piccolino. Nero.
Prova a guardare dietro se c'è ancora un insetto. Tu, Oscar, lo vedi ancora? È lì dentro. E come ha fatto ad entrare lì? Come ha fatto ad andare lì dentro?
Muso.
Col muso dici? Ma è piccolino. È piccolo e nero. Cosa senti?
Now, this video was made by the staff in our Infant Toddler Center. And of course, there is a professional development with a colleague biologist, and I would just put the attention on the timing. I don't know whether this is a good science curriculum. I don't know if with eels, that make me think about a fish, the eel, give good outcomes, but I think it gives you an example of the time for not all these children that you have seen are of Italian origin, so it's not a privileged background for all. The only thing is the timing for the children, the experiences we can see and share. So again, I'll end my presentation thanking you very much for your patience in listening to me today. It has been a very difficult day for me and difficult to be here. Just saying that we need more time to dialogue and discuss in deep what we believe and the words we use in defining children and the strategy of education. We need meetings like this. We need in-depth meeting. We need to exchange experiences with technology, but also in person, and hoping that in this process we experience not only worries for the future, but beauty and pleasure. Thank you very much, and thank you for your patience.